This is bread the way it was made 3,000 years ago. Stone ground grain and the whole kernel, bran, germ, everything. Iron in the loaf, magnesium in the loaf, the B vitamins in the loaf. Today, we buy those back one bottle at a time. A capsule for iron, a powder for magnesium, tablets for what we milled out of the flour, a shelf full of what bread used to carry, and somehow we have never felt more worn out. But 2,800 years ago, a loaf exactly like this one was baking over coals in the worst desert on earth, set down by a hand no man saw, beside a prophet who had just given up on living. The strongest man of his generation, the man who outran a king's chariot, lay under a lone desert tree and prayed for the end. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die, and said, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." And God's answer was already baking. This is how God fed Elijah when he wanted to die. And before the end, you'll see why one meal, bread and water, carried a finished man 40 days. Because that loaf was not the first table God set for this man. Elijah lived through the worst famine in the Old Testament, 3.5 years without rain. And Scripture writes down everything he ate. 3 tables on record, bread and meat, twice a day, flour and olive oil from a jar that would not empty, and 1 flat loaf on desert coals with a jar of cool water. Tonight we take each table in turn, what the food was, how it was made, and what the text says it did to his body. It begins with a drought, no rain until Elijah says so, and God hides him at the brook Cherith with the strangest meal delivery in Scripture. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. Now slow down and look at that stone. The bread first, barley or emmer wheat, ground by hand between 2 stones, and a quern removes nothing. Bran, germ, kernel, all of it into the flour, and onto a hot stone the same morning. Coarse, dark, dense, you can still read a lifetime of it in ancient teeth, worn smooth by stone-ground grain. And the whole seed means the whole package. Barley's slow-burning fiber, beta-glucan, one of the most studied fibers in modern nutrition, and emmer, the old wheat, carrying more protein than the wheat in a modern loaf. Then the flesh. Scripture doesn't name the animal. Lamb or goat, we're not told. But we know what meat meant there. Ordinary families tasted it a few times a year, at feast or sacrifice. He receives it twice a day in a famine, complete protein for rebuilding, iron for the blood, B12, which the ancient pantry holds almost nowhere but animal food, laid on a stone by birds that steal food. God took the scavenger of the desert and made it a waiter. Grain for fuel, meat for rebuilding, cold water from the brook, a hunted man eating better than the palace hunting him. Until the brook shrank, a finger narrower every morning, and went dry. God sends him north, to Zarephath, to a widow gathering firewood at the gate. He asks for bread, and her answer is an exact recipe and a death sentence in one breath. "As the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake, but an handful of meal in a barrel and a little oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks, that I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die." A handful of meal, a little oil, 2 sticks of fire, the entire recipe, the poorest bread on earth, and one of the oldest, coarse flour, likely barley, worked with oil, flattened thin, laid on a hearthstone. 2 ingredients, the daily bread of the ancient poor. And what oil? Olives crushed under a stone wheel, pressed in baskets, poured off unfiltered. What we call extra virgin today was, back then, simply oil, drop for drop, more energy than anything else in that pantry, rich in the golden fat modern research keeps circling back to, with that peppery sting in the throat that told them it was fresh. It turns a thin cake of flour into a meal that holds a body for hours. Bread and fat, the pairing that fed the working Mediterranean for millennia. Nobody counted what was in it. They knew you could plow on it. She bakes his portion first on the word he carries. The jar will not empty. The text records the result like a ledger. And she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat many days. 3 people, 1 jar of flour, 1 cruse of oil, week after week. The miracle didn't multiply a banquet. It multiplied the simplest recipe in Scripture. 3 years of that bread. Then Carmel, 1 prophet against 450, fire from heaven, a nation on its faces, the rain returning. And Elijah, on the strength of a widow's flatbread, outruns the king's chariot to Jezreel, on foot, in the storm. It lasted 1 night. By morning, Jezebel's message, by this time tomorrow, you die. The man-fire could not frighten, broke. 100 miles south, the servant left behind. A day's walk into the desert. No food, no water skin. A man who plans on tomorrow carries water. He doesn't. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a juniper tree, and he requested for himself that he might die and said, "It is enough. Now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers." It is enough. Most of us past a certain age have stood one night inside that sentence. Then he falls asleep, the only thing left in him, and heaven's answer begins gently with letting him. He sleeps under the broom tree, and while he sleeps, someone builds a fire. And as he lay and slept under a juniper tree, behold, then an angel touched him and said unto him, "Arise and eat." Not arise and pray, arise and eat. And waiting at his head is a meal described down to the cookware. And he looked, and behold, there was a cake baken on the coals, and a cruse of water at his head. And he did eat and drink, and laid him down again. A cake baked on the coals. Watch how it's made. That desert bakes it the same way today. Flat stones go into the fire until they glow. The dough, whole ground grain and water, is flattened straight onto them, embers raked over. Minutes later it's drawn out, tapped clean of ash, torn open, steam. No pan, no oven, fire, stone, grain. And it is the loaf from the start of this video, the whole kernel in the bread because nothing had been milled out. Iron that carries oxygen in the blood, magnesium that hundreds of the body's daily reactions lean on, B vitamins that turn food into fuel. Beside it, the half of the meal we forget, water. He walked in carrying none, and before a failing body wants food, it needs water. In that heat, a walking man loses it by the quart. A clay cruse, cool, full to the neck, set down by the same hand that built the fire. He eats, he drinks, he lies back down, and God lets him sleep. Then the second touch, and the angel of the Lord came again the second time, and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for thee." The journey is too great for thee. No speech, no correction. Second helpings, warm bread again, fresh water again. 2 meals and 2 sleeps before a single word of instruction. Bread, water, rest, heaven's whole pantry for a broken man. Now the verse this whole episode walks toward. The Bible doesn't just record the menu, it records what the meal did. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went in the strength of that meat 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. In the strength of that meat. If you were with us for John the Baptist, you know that word. In this Bible's Old English, meat means food. In the strength of that food, a man who had asked to die walks 40 days and 40 nights, 200 miles of desert, to Horeb, the mountain of God. Let's be honest, no chart explains 40 days on one meal. Scripture calls it what it is, strength God put in the food. But look at what God chose to multiply, not a feast. The traveler's ration, whole bread and water, the two foods that have carried desert crossings forever. One meal stretched across 6 weeks of walking. Now set the 3 tables side by side, whole grain bread, meat when the body needed rebuilding, flour and olive oil, water. Nothing refined, nothing stripped, nothing on those tables needed a label, and nothing had to be bought back in a capsule because nothing had been taken out. Only then, after the bread, the water, the sleep, the 40 days, comes the famous part: wind, earthquake, fire, and the Lord in none of them. And after the earthquake a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire a still small voice. A still small voice, for a man finally fed enough and rested enough to hear it. God fed him back to life before he said anything at all. 3 tables, bread and flesh from a raven's beak, a widow's 2-ingredient loaf that outlasted a famine, a cake baked on the coals by heaven's own hand. None of it was rich, all of it was enough, and every bite is written down. Of Elijah's 3 tables, which would you sit at? The ravens, the widows, or the angels? Tell me in the comments. I read every answer. Next time, a city under siege, a prophet on rations, and the strangest recipe God ever dictated. 6 ingredients in Ezekiel chapter 4. Siege bread that people still bake today. If this table fed you tonight, you know what to do. Until then, arise and eat.